I had just moved to my new college town and didn't even have a cell phone yet after leaving the one my folks paid for during undergrad behind. I was grown and could take care of myself. What a nitwit I was. I was shopping for school supplies and things for my new apartment one evening during my first week of grad school. As I left the parking lot with my purchases, I noticed this truck pull up behind me at the exit. It was late, and there weren't too many people out. I pulled out, and so did he. It was a few miles down a long retail street with lots of stoplights before my turn. As I drove, I realized the guy in the truck was trying to get my attention. I was in a relationship, so I ignored him. Over the next few miles, he kept trying to get me to look at him. Some red lights he would end up ahead of me, some behind or beside. At every light, he positioned himself so he could stare at me, either directly or in one of his mirrors. His gaze was unwavering, and my anxiety rose. He was driving oddly, speeding up close to my bumper, hitting his brakes when he was in front of me, swerving close to my car a couple of times. Finally, at a red light where he was beside me, I glanced over and absolutely started to panic when I was met with an unbelievably empty, unwavering stare and realized he was fiddling with himself. He was getting off on the fact that I was terrified and he was following me, trying to force me to pull over. At one point, I scooted through an intersection on a hard yellow a couple of cars ahead of him, thinking I could shake him. Nope. He went around the cars at the light and ran the red and got back in front of me. A freeway entrance ramp came up, and I tried to fake him out by putting on my signal and getting into the merge lane for it. He took the bait and started up the ramp. I quickly got out of the merge lane and continued straight. Again, I'd hoped to lose him, but he drove his truck down the embankment to keep following. At another light where he was beside me, I pulled through the light and then turned at the last possible second. He made a U-turn and ran another red to follow me. My panic really ramped up at that point. With no cell phone, no sense of direction, in a new city, I really didn't know what to do. So I turned on classic rock and forced myself to sing along, and forced myself to go the speed limit so I wouldn't crash out of terrified stupidity. I decided to drive to the supermarket across town because I remembered it had a police station in it. He followed me all the way there. He burned out of the lot as soon as he saw all the cop cruisers parked out front. I filed a report and asked for a police escort home. I insisted because something told me this creep was waiting for me to leave the police station. He was. As soon as I pulled out, I saw him. I pulled over and told the officer following me, and he went after him, but the truck had taken off and the cop couldn't catch him. The police got the surveillance video from the first store. It turned out this jerk had been dogging me the entire time I was shopping. I saw him on surveillance footage following me through the store. I saw him follow me out, close enough to grab my elbow. I saw footage of him circling the lot in his truck waiting for me to pull out when I took too long to unload my cart. My heart sank. I was able to remember 6 of 7 digits of his plate and the make and model of his truck. In the end, the cops did nothing. They said it was a he said/she said since the surveillance video didn't catch him doing anything particularly unlawful and was a losing case to try to charge him with anything. I ended up trading vehicles with a friend for a couple of months to try to feel safer and went on with my life. I had no idea what he did just a handful of months later until almost 15 years had passed. I was watching a Discovery ID show about the kidnapping and murder of Sandy Jeffers. I almost fell out of my seat when I saw the mugshot of her killer, Aaron Lee Skeen. It was him. I was so disgusted that law enforcement did nothing in my case that I tracked down the investigator in the murder case, and after verifying some things about the vehicle that were changed in the TV reenactment to weed out people making crap up, she took my contact info and official statement. She could neither confirm nor deny that my run-in was with Skeen, but qualified her statement by saying, "At least you don't have to worry about him anymore because he got life without parole." I only wish something could have been done when he terrorized me. Perhaps things would have been different for Sandy. So my boyfriend recently moved to the city and got this room in a student building. To explain, we have 3 different levels, and each level is the same. It has 4 individual doors with individual locks. Each door is a separate room you can rent. So you share a shower, toilet, and kitchen, but overall it's kind of like having your own place. More like an apartment than a house. He lives on the 3rd floor and we recently bought a cabinet for his place. As we were lifting the cabinet through the front door, some guy also comes into the building with us. We politely let him pass because lifting the thing upstairs is going to take a lot of time. I smile at him and say hello, and then I see his face. All my stranger danger alarms start going off. He had this weird smile, like a satisfied, smug smile. He towered over me and I saw his dirty mustache that barely even was a mustache. That kind of thing 14-year-olds grow. Nothing really is there yet, just some hair here and there. Also, his hair looked greasy, and he just looked dirty. We noticed he went to the second floor, so lucky for us. My boyfriend and I ignore it, but once we get upstairs, we both agree he creeped us out. We tried not to judge and just let it go. Like a week or so later, we have a dog over. We go for a walk with him in the evening, and it's still bright outside at this time. As we start to walk back to the building, we spot the creepy guy and have to pass him because of the way he was walking. It was like he was moving in slow motion, with the satisfied, smug smile on his face again. But that's not what creeped us out. Looking at his face, we realized there was no way he was sober. He looked so out of this world, very noticeably on drugs. In that moment, the way he walked and the way he looked, I just got really wrong vibes from him. I did not want to be close to him at all, and my stranger danger alarms went off again. This happened near the city center. My boyfriend and I decide not to walk back with him to the building, so we take another route just to avoid being near him, and we take our time to make sure he's in his room before we enter the building. But this is the creepy part. I'll have to give you some background information. 3 weeks before our first encounter with this guy, someone randomly got murdered while he was jogging near the school campus. Stabbed, died instantly. The suspect has been seen at that time near the campus, and so a drawing of the suspect had been released. But they didn't have him and didn't really have anything to work with. Now just today, my boyfriend and I got back from his work at around 4 in the afternoon when we noticed someone in a suit standing outside. We didn't really think too much of it. Later this night, the guy who lives next door catches me as I just got back from the bathroom and asks me if we already have a key to the front door. I say yes, we do have one. Why? He said that the police had to break the door down, so he was in charge of getting everyone new keys. My boyfriend at this time joins us, together with the person who lives on the other side of us. I ask what happened. Apparently, the guy who killed the person near campus lived on the second floor. My hair starts standing up straight when I hear this. I ask if we could see how he looked. He told me he was tall, black hair with a weird mustache and looks kind of dirty. It was the creepy dude. My boyfriend and I are still in utter shock that we lived so close to this murderer. Someone who walked around near the city center and cooked his dinner in the shared kitchen while he took someone's life. Someone I smiled at, said hello to, and tried to avoid. About 10 years ago, I studied abroad. I had few friends in this new country and was glad to find a place to live with some cool people my age. I started hanging out with this crew, which became my friends, and we used to smoke a lot of weed. Things were going well. There was this one friend of my roommate's, Frank, who came over to our place from time to time. I thought it was odd because he was like twice everybody's age. He was very intense as a person and made me feel slightly uncomfortable. The first time I met him, he seemed extremely suspicious of me and would ask me all kinds of questions to figure me out. But he had a good sense of humor and would always crack great jokes. In a way, he was kind of charming, and my roommates seemed to love him. Also, he always brought pizza. I asked one of my friends what the deal was with this guy, and he was like, "Oh, you don't know? Last year he found his wife and her brothers murdered in their flat. He is under investigation, but he didn't do it." I was taken aback by this. How could they really know he didn't do it, and why did they want to hang around with a potential psycho? I gave it the benefit of the doubt, but I certainly saw Frank in a new light now. Time went on, and Frank came by our place almost daily. He was very clever and sly, manipulative. I got to know more about his background. He used to be in a gang when he was my age. He had been in prison most of the time in between then and now for violence. This did not help me trust him. I couldn't believe how naive my roommates were to trust this man. Then the police went out and declared him a suspect. By now, this had become the biggest investigation ever in that particular area. He was interrogated but released due to lack of evidence. Back home at our place, he would sit and talk about how he was a victim of a conspiracy, and all my friends would nod and believe him. I felt crazy being the only one who didn't believe it. He must have sensed it because he took me outside and asked me if I believed him. I said yeah, sure I did, because by now I was starting to get really afraid of him. I asked him about the murders, and he told me his version of the event where he, according to him, found the bodies. It was gruesome, but I still had doubts. To my horror, he would crack jokes about the whole thing at another time. Who in their right mind would joke about that? In my mind, only a complete psychopath. I started researching what a psychopath actually is, and learned that this guy fits every classical definition. I freaked out because I couldn't figure out what he really wanted from us. I started getting paranoid and believing that he actually planned on killing me and my roommates. I couldn't tell this to my roommates because they were fully blinded by this guy's charades and trusted him. At one point, I started sleeping with a knife in my bed. That's how scared I was that he was going to come and murder us like he murdered those poor souls. This was a horrible time for me. On top of that, the police had been tipped off about the relatively large amounts of weed being kept in the house and started raiding the place. 2 of my roommates were busted, and this marked the breakup of our group. The day I moved out, Frank helped me with my stuff and looked at me menacingly. "You are all right," he said. "I actually planned on killing you, but you are all right." I kid you not. He told me this. The others laughed it off as a joke, but I saw it very differently. I was very glad to leave after hanging out with this murderer on and off for almost 2 years. Frank would be arrested shortly later, starting a huge trial that lasted several years. I found some new friends and found my way back to some normality in my life. That's when I realized how messed up the whole situation was. I had been isolated with all this and had no one else to turn to. A year later, I was back in my home country and followed the trial. All the craziness that surfaced about this man during the trial convinced me that I was probably right all along. He was mentally unstable and was convicted to 4 life sentences. He will never be a free man again.